In this video, I want to talk about voicings in Cubase, which is a topic that if you're a composer who's really tried to dive into how to use follow chord track, the chord track, and the voicings feature, you've probably been pretty frustrated. I know I have for a long, long time because it's not that clear from the online manual and the manual that Cubase gives us about exactly how this works. Okay, but there's a lot of promise to it. So in short, the idea is that you can use the chord track to create kind of customized voicings, and then you can actually have different tracks in your project follow that chord track voicing, and thereby you have control over what's playing in each of your voices, what's playing in the bass, what's playing in the tenor and the alto, the soprano, right, are the typical voices. To have control over that as a composer, but to have the ease of the computer kind of like sorting that out for you. And you can just decide, I want my viola to be taking the alto, and I want my cello to be taking the tenor. Like, you can just make those choices creatively and artistically. That's the promise, right? But it doesn't really work out that way just based on the initial information. But I've done a lot of research into this. I've done a lot of testing, a lot of trial and error, and that's what I'm talking about in this particular video, because I think this is really, really, really a useful tool. It's just unfortunate that Steinberg hasn't really documented it really well. So I'm going to take myself off the camera here, and I'm going to look a little bit at just an example. So I've got this little MIDI part, and as you'll see right here, I've just basically got 4 C major triads, C, E, and G. And I've made that kind of obvious because, let me go ahead here and just select scale and chords. So I've made just 4 because I want to first kind of explain a little bit about what's happening, right? So there's 3 aspects to this that I'm going to cover. What's happening, mastering these settings and understanding how to use them, and also there's track settings. I'll get into that. And then piano versus guitar versus basics. That'll all make sense to you if you haven't looked at this before. If you're new to it, then this will all make sense within the next couple of minutes, but just hang in there. This is a big topic, but this is basically like Cubase kind of functioning as like our composer's assistant, somebody who's going to like put the right voices in the right places so that our sketch idea can get filled out. So let's look at this. So I've got these 4 C major chords, but you'll notice that my chord track up here, I have a B flat, a D7, a B flat, and an E flat over G. So how do I get this to work? What I ultimately want is these chords down here to represent a B flat, a D7, a B flat, and an E flat over G. So let's just see how we can do that. Well, first step we want to do is we go to our instrument track up here, and we're going to go to the inspector. And I'm in Cubase 13 right now, so the interface might look a little different if you're on 12 or 11 or something. But you should have this follow chord track sort of area in the inspector. You have your track selected, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to say follow chords and scales. Let's just do follow chords for now. And you're going to get this pop-up over here. I'm going to just leave it on the default of follow directly. And lo and behold, we notice that our MIDI now is no longer 4 C major chords. But what is it, right? What's actually going on? First of all, I used to have 3 notes here. Now I only have 2. This is a D7, but I've got a D and a C and an A. I have no F sharp. What's going on? So this is the first kind of conundrum that you run into if you try and peel back the layers of this onion all by yourself, which I've done, and I've approached it many times. Gosh, it's so frustrating. Anyway, I can help you understand a lot more about it and give you some perspective on at least how to figure out what it's doing, but also how to get it to do what you want it to do, okay? So let me take myself off the screen again, and I'm going to just hide my controller lanes here so we got a little more real estate for the MIDI. Okay, so we've got a B flat here in our chord track, but obviously B flat and F is not a B flat chord. So what's going on? Well, let's look at the voicings. So I'm opening up, got my track here. This track's voicings right here, it says from chord track, following from chord track. So let's go up to our chord track and see, well, what's the voicing set up here? So voicing up here is set to piano. All options. Adaptive voicings is off. Automatic scales is off too. Now, adaptive voicings is just to kind of cover a little bit of background. Adaptive voicings is going to try to follow good voice leading. So if we were going from, say, a B flat major chord to a D7, a common tone there would be D. D would be the third of B flat major. It's the root of D7. Good voice leading would maintain that D, right? Rather than having a bunch of jumps and skips all in our voicing from chord to chord. The example that we're seeing down here, this is kind of like, there's a lot of jumping around here. If we're trying to go to a D7, should be a D, and an F sharp, should be an F sharp in there. That would be very close to F, so we should have an F sharp right there, but we don't, and we're going to get to the bottom of why that is. But that's what adaptive voicings are. Automatic scales, it's going to create scale events here if we turn that on to try and figure out. If I turn that on, you'll see a little event appear here. And it's determined that the C blues 1 scale, which if I click on this, it'll actually show me which notes are included in that scale, is suggesting that that scale contains all of these chords. So I'm going to take their word for that. That's fine. I'm not too concerned about that right now, so I might just leave automatic scales on. Let's look at voicings. That's really the main topic of this video. We've got some sort of fabricated presets here, and ultimately each of these sub libraries, I guess you call them. Cubase, by the way, calls piano, basic, and guitar. They call these voicing libraries. You are not able to create your own, so you have to choose one of them, and then you get various settings that you can use. And these checkboxes in different configurations represent these options. So for example, pop 1, we have triads with major 9 and 4-note chords selected, but the other ones are unchecked. If we go to jazz, then we have a different arrangement. So these are just kind of presets that you could use if they suit you, but they very rarely suit me. So I'm going to have to look here. So I'm going to uncheck all of these, and I'm going to look at the voicings that we have here. And I'm going to start by enabling triads, okay? And what I don't really see any significant change. As I knock these out, I don't really see any change in my MIDI. And again, that's really confusing. So here's what I suggest you do. I'm going to actually not have all my chords on one instrument track. I'm going to create 4 instrument tracks here because I want to have an SATB voicing, a soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. Or if this was just a guitar chord, I've got this D7 in there. I want to have D, F sharp, A, and I want to have C. I want to have my flat 7. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually take this, let me zoom out here, and I'm going to duplicate this. Then I'm going to duplicate these, so I have 4 tracks. Okay, I'm going to get rid of the MIDI on this one. And this is kind of cool. I'm going to just get rid of all the MIDI notes. I think, yeah, some had gotten overlaid there. So I just want basically 4 notes. It doesn't matter what combination they're in. You're going to see why in a minute. So I'm going to call this soprano. I'm going to call this, sorry for the delay there, alto. I'm going to call this tenor. I'm going to call this bass. All right. And what I'm going to do is now change my settings a little bit, where instead of following chord track just chords, I'm going to go to single voice and I'm going to choose soprano. Then on alto, I'm going to choose, I do actually have to, the reason this is grayed out is because I don't have a MIDI track there. So I'm going to just drag these onto my tracks. Doesn't matter what these notes are at the moment, which is really kind of cool. It's part of what makes this a great workflow. So this is set to single voice soprano. I'm going to set this to single voice alto. This thing comes up here. I have to hit OK, follow directly, and change that to alto. Go down to tenor, single voice, hit OK, go to tenor. This is one-time setup that we have to do, and after this, life gets a lot easier. But this is the most reliable way, using the single voices and having multiple tracks. This is the most reliable way that I've found. We're going to always leave this tracks voicing on from chord track, but you can choose your own voicing for this particular track if you want. I just don't find that very helpful, so I don't do it. I always leave for all of these. They have different voices, single voices, but they all get their track voicing from the chord track. And what that means is that up here in the chord track where I've selected piano with these settings, these are the voicings that we're going to get. Now it's going to be a lot easier for us to see how Cubase is configuring these voicings. So let's check this out. Okay, so you should be able to see this right now. I've got, for my B flat chord, let's go into my chord track. And let's just see kind of how, we'll see the MIDI actually change in that lower area. Check that out. So when I choose triads, it literally goes to triads. We're looking at 3-note triads. And I've found personally that if I leave triads and 4-note chords and 5-note chords enabled, then I generally get the best results. Now, if I hit this adaptive voicing up here, you're going to notice that let's see, it didn't change the voicings. A lot of times it does change the voicings. It didn't do that here. But I'm going to leave adaptive voicings on because I'm going to go, I'm going to just assume that I always want to have good voice leading. And Cubase does a pretty good job of that, a pretty good job. And that's what I'm trying to get you to, is a place where the chord track and this follow chord voicings is doing a pretty good job. But again, our focus is the voicings. So let's look at, I'm going to just pull up a browser here. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at what Cubase has to say about their follow chord track or their voicings. So chord track voicings, setting up voicings. Okay. So I just looked this up on Google, and let me bring back my computer here, take me off. Okay, so this is the page. It's called Setting Up Voicings. It's on the Cubase online sort of manual. And I'm going to use piano back in Cubase. The reason I'm going to choose the piano voicing generally is because it has the most options. And I do a lot of orchestral work, being able to add root note and duplicate the root and sometimes fatten it up, which as the tooltip says, duplicates the tenor. Those are all very constructive additions when you're working in orchestral music. I will tell you that just in general terms, enabling triads, 4-note chords, and 5-note chords is my go-to. The voicings are going to change depending on what you have. Now, I only had, I have 4 parts, right? But under this D7, I only have 3 notes. I've got no root, I've got a third and a fifth, and the flat 7, right? F sharp, A, and C. No root. Now, if I click this add root note, you'll notice that I should get a D. Let's see why I didn't. These are the kinds of things that, you know, are just very strange. So, let's see if I can get a root note in there. Duplicate root note. That's strange. So now I've got D, F sharp, and C. So I've got the root, the third, and the seventh. Let's see if I take out the four note. See, this is the kind of weirdness you get. You get the D sharp. Now, why on earth do you get a D sharp? Basically, you're going to get a D sharp if you have 5-note chords enabled along with triads. These are some of the problems with the system that are not communicated well, but I've proven out in my trial and error. If you only have a plain chord like B flat, a lot of times the voicing will like add a 9. If there's 4 voices, if it's going to add a 4th voice, like I've got SATB, but it's only a triad B flat, a lot of times it's going to add a 9 and it doesn't ask me. Likewise, sometimes if I specify in the chord like a minor 9 and I don't have that checkbox enabled, then I might get it, I might not. It's wonky. So here's the takeaway. These all of these checkboxes up here. Sorry, my camera inverts me, so when I point to my left, it goes to your right. All those checkboxes, think of these. These are not. Think of these as selections Cubase can choose from. So you want to make sure that Cubase has a choice that is what you want it to be. So I want this first chord, B flat, to just be a straight up triad. When I check triads, I get just that. Now, this is in second inversion. It's an F, a B flat, and a D. So I don't get to choose. It's not like I said, hey, I want B flat over F. If I go B flat over D, you'll notice that I don't get anything there. It's in fact, let's see. So in our soprano, we've got F. In our alto, we get B flat, so we get the root in alto. In our tenor, we got an F. And in our bass, we got F, even though I put B flat over D there. So what's going on? You know, it's really just not always that reliable. That's been my experience. But if I go ahead here, I'm going to select all these. So since, let's just select all of these so we can see what we have. So I'm a little confused here. We got F there, we got F there, we got B flat, and we have 2 Fs. So I see. So the soprano, the soprano and the bass voices, they're producing exactly the same note, which is F3. And that's really bizarre. You know, that's just bizarre. If I take off the adaptive voicings, I might get different results, maybe. So why I'm getting F3 in the soprano and the bass is not really all that clear. Let's see, did I make a mistake? Oh, that's what the mistake is. So I made the mistake, and my follow chord voice should really be bass. Okay, so I made a mistake. So now this is set to bass. I just want to check tenor and alto. Okay, much better. So let's see now. I said that I wanted my chord B flat over D, and I've got D in the bass, and I've got a second inversion B flat chord there. So I'm going to turn on adaptive voicings again. And so I've got triads, and I've got my root note. When I add that root note, you can see my root notes go in there. I've got B flat over D, D for the D7, B flat, and then I said specifically up here E flat over G. If I turn this into just E flat, and I turn this into B flat, then I should get in my bass the root notes B flat, D, B flat, and E flat. And that's what I get, B flat, D, B flat, and E flat. So I get that in the bass because I have add bass, add root note checked, and I'm not specifying my own slash notation there or bass line. So if I click on duplicate root, I will get two roots, but not always the way that I'm expecting. Now, the voicings, let's say since I have these four voicings now, I'm getting D in the root. So what's the story in D7? What is the story with this D sharp or E flat? So that is a flat 9 on a dominant chord. I'm going to go ahead and check 4-note chords and check it out. Just by not having it selected, it tried its best with a triad, and as far as I can tell, it just basically ignored this note and didn't do anything helpful with it. But if I choose 4-note chords, then it bounces it down to a C. By the way, since I have scale chords set up over here under coloring, and I've set up my own coloring so that everything green is actually in the chord track, that's how I can know at a glance that everything is configured correctly. But let's take a look at these voicings, right? Triad and 4-note chords. Why does it work like that? Let's take a look at 4-note chords. So when 4-note chords is set, it sets a 4-note chord without the root note. When triads are set, it just sets a triad. Chords with more than 3 notes are not changed. Chords with less than 3 notes are not changed. So essentially, my reading of this is that when I enable, sorry, I'm trying to find the right zoom level where you can see everything. When only triads are enabled, it literally forces a triad. When 4-note chords are an option, it looks for the 4 chords, and because I have add root note there, it adds it, right? If you remember from the Cubase page, it said 4-note voicings. A D7 would be a 4-note voicing. It removes the root, so there's no D here. So I have to manually add it. So now I'm getting B flat major. I've got a very solid bass note. I'm getting my triad represented here. In the 4-note chord D7, I have my 7th, right? Now let's say that I were to change this E flat to something a bit more exotic, like an E flat 9. What did it do? Let's take that 9 off again and look right here. It bounces this E flat up to F. So it took what was an extra root note in the soprano, and it bounced it up to a 9. Now that's because I have a 4-note voicing. If I take that 4-note voicing off, it screws up my D7. It didn't seem to screw up my E flat 9, which is still giving me E flat, G, B flat, so root 3rd and 5th, and F on the 9. If I go ahead and choose triads with major 9, what do I get there? I get something, my E flat 9 with the triads selected now gives me, it does give me a 9. It takes this G and moves it into the soprano, takes this F and moves it down here into the tenor. So it just kind of changed them around. I prefer the other option because it has slightly better voice leading. But I guess this would be, one of those things you could make a decision about. The triads with major 9, minor 9 don't have any impact here. So as I said earlier, I generally find that if I select triads, 4-note chords, and 5-note chords, add a root note, and if I'm doing orchestral work, duplicate the root so that I've got something for the cello and something for the bass, so to speak. But that's optional. You can see that actually duplicating the root note, it puts it 1 octave above the bass. So that means the other voicings change, right? I lose the A here, I lose the 5th in favor of another D. I might not want that all the time. So this might be the voicing that I go with ultimately. Here's the takeaway that that I think of in my workflow. First of all, it's better to just create 4 tracks or however many voices you're going to use. 4 voicings, SATB, soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, tend to be the main ones to use. If I go ahead and play this, I get a really nice chord. And I can see from the display all the notes are green because I have my coloring set up to tell me if anything's not in the chord. Really nice voice leading, it sounds really good. And now I can take each one of these instruments and I could make that a violin, and I could make that the viola, and I could make that the cello, and I could make that the bass, or I could make them choir, or I could make them phrase-based instruments like guitar strumming and that sort of thing. So I hope from this lesson you understand a bit more what's happening. The checkboxes in the customization are really you saying, Cubase, choose from one of these options. So the more you limit the options, kind of the more predictable the outcome becomes. You're going to want different settings if you are using 4-note voicings or 5-note voicings. If you're using jazz voicings, like you got sharp 9s and sharp 11s, you're using altered voicings, then you definitely want to make sure you have a setting in there that permits that. If you are just doing straight up triads, you only need 3 voices per chord, and you're writing a guitar part, then by all means switch over here to under your chord track. You can go to the guitar voicing, and they have a nice option here, 3-string triads, which becomes super strict. As you can see here, it's just basically locks it down to the very basic triads. So you want to be aware that all the options you check, Cubase will kind of select from those options. And if you get a weird note, you're like, where's that D sharp coming from? Then check different options, find the option that really changes that meaningfully. Look for the combination that changes that meaningfully. And I really recommend using this coloring scheme so that once you've worked out your whole piece and you've got 10 minutes of music, you can highlight all of it and you can see any notes that aren't in a chord. And that'll help you figure out, oh, my voicing, my automatic voicing got screwed up there. Just want to make one quick note, although I am going to be doing more lessons in the near future about these kinds of topics related to chord track and following voicings, that a really nice part of this workflow is I can decide later on that, I want to change this B flat to a G minor chord. And you can see that it changed the voicings for me. Let me go back to my piano voicing. And I'm going to just choose 4/5 and add the root. So you can see like now it's got this cool G minor voicing. And that's really nice workflow. Anyway, that's where I'm going to end it. It's already been a really long video. If you have questions, please post in the comments. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. And I will be up in very short order with another related video to chord tracks. Thanks again for watching. Bye.